Hi, 6th graders. Today we're starting Chapter 5. We're going to be looking at rounding fractions and mixed numbers. By the end of the lesson today, you want to be able to accurately round fractions and mixed numbers to the nearest half or the nearest whole. Really what we're getting to is that it's often helpful to round fractions to the nearest half in real-world situations because halves are super easy to work with and usually have an easier time when we can get the information that we need. There's going to be three situations that we look at. We're going to round down, round to the half, or round up. If the numerator is much smaller than the denominator, we're going to round to the previous whole number. So, for example, 1/8, 1 is a long ways away from 8, and 1/8 is really between 0 and 1, so 1/8 would round to 0. 4 and 2/15, 2 is really far away from 15, so that's actually between 4 and 5, and since it's rounding down, we round to 4. We're going to round to the nearest half. If the numerator is about half of the denominator, we're going to round to the half. So for example, 2 and 3/8, half of 8 is 4. Since 3 is close to 4, we would round this to 2 1/2. At the same time, 5/8 is just a little over 4, so this one we would just round to 1/2. Then we're going to round up is when the numerator is almost as large as the denominator. We're going to round up to the next whole number. So since 5 is almost 6, 5/6 is between 0 and 1, we would round this to 1. 10 and 11/12 is between 10 and 11. Since 11 is close to 12, we would round this to 11. So even though that might seem a little confusing, we're going to break it down a little bit. We want to round each number to the nearest half. What we're going to do is first we're going to look at the wholes that the number is in between. So 2/9 is really somewhere between 0 and 1. Now, because it's 2/9, we're now going to look at that in terms of the denominator. So 0 is really 0/9, 1 is really the same thing as 9/9, and half of 9 is 4.5. So the half mark would be 4.5 out of 9. Now we're going to look at 2. So we could also break this up a little bit further, because if you think about it, like 5 is our halfway point between 0 and 10 to tell us to round up and down. So half of 4.5 would be 2.25. And then halfway between 4.5 and 9 would be 6.75. And that's kind of telling us the mark for rounding. Since 2 is less than 2.5, so it would be about right here in our number line, it's closest to the 0 mark, or 0/9. So if we're rounding this to the nearest half, we'd actually be rounding this to 0 and 0/9, or just 0. Now, let's redo this, looking at tenths. Okay. So we rounded 2/9 to 0. So 2 and 9/10 is really between the whole numbers of 2 and 3. In the middle we'd have 2 1/2. Now we're looking at in terms of tenths. So this would really be 2 and 0/10. This would really be 2 and 5/10 because 5 is half of 10. And then this would be the same thing as 2 and 10/10 because 10/10 becomes a whole, which would give us 3. Now is 9 closest to 0, 5, or 10? Hopefully you know that 9 is closest to 10, so it would be the closest to 2 and 10/10, which is really the same thing as 3. So this would become just 3. Okay. So why don't you go ahead and pause the video and try the next one on your own with 1 and 2/5 and see how you do. Okay. If we're looking at it, 1 2/5 is between the whole numbers of 1 and 2. Here we would have 1 1/2. 1 is really the same thing as 1 0/5. 1 1/2 is the same thing as 1 2.5 because that's half of 5. And this is really the same as 1 5/5. 2 is closest to 2.5, so we would round this to 1 1/2. The thing you have to be aware of is sometimes you have to round up or round down despite of what the rule says, depending on the situation. So if I'm buying a new sofa to put in our basement, the width of my door coming into the house is 29 3/4 inches. When I go to the store, should I round my door measurement up or down to guarantee that the sofa will fit through the door, and why? So you go ahead and pause the video and then try this one and the next one on your own and then check to see how you did. Hopefully here you said that you should round the measurement of your door down. And the reason being is we want to make sure that the sofa fits. So even though 29 3/4 is closer to 30 than it is to 29, if we bought a 30-inch sofa, it wouldn't fit through the door because of the extra 1/4 inch. So here we would run around down to 29 to make sure the sofa will fit. Okay. What about the next one? When I flush my flower bed outside, I calculate I will need 4 1/8 gallons of fertilizer to cover my flower bed. When I go to the store, should I buy 4 or 5 gallons of fertilizer and why? Hopefully you said 5 gallons, because even though 4 1/8 is closest to 4, 4 gallons would not be enough. Because I'd have an eighth, or like I'd need another eighth of a gallon to cover my whole flower bed.